Forward and Out has been made possible by the generous support of the following: The Loft, Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center; Choice Travel; Stephanie's Living Room.
For many homosexuals around the world, the threat of persecution is all too real and all too frequent. Many live in fear, perpetuated by laws that criminalize sexual behavior between consenting adults of the same sex. In some countries, torture is used to force confessions of homosexuality and to elicit the names and addresses of other lesbians and gay men. In other countries, death is an acceptable punishment for those accused of homosexuality. Many of those who face the daily dangers of homophobic violence are resorting to what they feel is their only alternative: to flee for asylum into the arms of Uncle Sam and the U.S. immigration system. I'm Eileen Karn. Welcome to another edition of Forward and Out. In March of 1994, the United States Department of Immigration and Naturalization Service granted asylum to a Mexican man who suffered persecution based on his sexual orientation. What does this decision mean? For an answer to this and other questions, join me in welcoming Suzanne Goldberg, staff attorney at Lambda Legal Defense and founding member of the Lesbian and Gay Immigration and Asylum Task Force, and Levi Soloway, coordinator of the task force. Thank you for joining us today. Suzanne, tell us about that Mexican case. How did that impact the whole asylum situation? And were there other cases as well that have created the current situation?
Sure. The Mexican case was one important case in a series of cases in which the persecution of lesbians and gay men has been recognized as a basis for granting political asylum in the United States. Mm-hmm. In particular, the Mexican man in that case had applied for political asylum because he had experienced persecution on account of being gay in Mexico. Similarly, there's another case out in San Francisco where a Brazilian gay man also applied for political asylum after being harassed and at one point beaten up with no support or protection from police authorities because he's gay. So both of these men have come to the United States, and after serious deliberation with themselves and their attorneys decided to apply for political asylum. Mm-hmm. And in both cases, actually, political asylum was granted. Mm-hmm. One of those cases is being appealed and will, I'm sure, be in the appeals process for a number of years.
Right. And it won't be until it's really gone all the way to the court system that it will really impact all the other people seeking asylum. Is that correct? It'll have to go through the different appeal processes till it becomes applicable to other cases. Is that right?
Well, there's an increasing recognition within the administration and within the INS that persecution based on being lesbian or gay renders somebody eligible for political asylum. Mm-hmm. In particular, to be eligible for political asylum in the United States, a person has to have a well-founded fear of persecution based on their being membership in a particular social group.
Right. Okay. So that's where being gay or lesbian would qualify somebody, and then someone individually has to show also that they fear for their own safety?
Right. It's not enough for a person to go into fill out their political asylum application and say, I'm gay and therefore I'm eligible. They have to demonstrate through their own personal testimony, and usually through the testimony of other people, that they have actually experienced persecution in their home country, which might range from forced hospitalization to being beaten up or assaulted. Often women have been sexually assaulted by police and other government officials, to any number of things. And once a person can demonstrate that and demonstrate a fear that they will be persecuted if they return to their home country, then their asylum application should be granted.
Right. Is there a problem in as much as violence against gay men and lesbians isn't really reported, or so that if you go to the government and say that I'm part of this group, and then you have to actually prove that the group is suffering, right? But you know, without statistical backup to that, there's a kind of a catch-22.
Right. Well, actually, what you're pointing out is a very serious problem. Until very recently, none of the mainstream organizations that document political or physical persecution of people ever studied what happens to lesbians and gay men. It is only after a lot of organizing among lesbian and gay activists that Amnesty International has begun to report on some of these instances of persecution, and also recently the formation of the International Lesbian and Gay Human Rights Commission, which is a group that's based in San Francisco and documents persecution of lesbians and gay men, has brought about an increased awareness of these issues. And these organizations also now provide tremendous support and resources to lesbians and gay men who are applying for political asylum and need to access information that they can't otherwise get.
Right. Oh, that's great that some things are being done, especially by an organization like Amnesty International. And the pressure brought by the lesbian and gay men's groups are really important. Levi, would you tell me about what your work is as coordinator of the task force, and what the task force main objective and mission is?
Sure. The Lesbian and Gay Immigration and Asylum Rights Task Force is formed to address all areas of discrimination against gay men and lesbians in immigration law. This includes the area of asylum, but it also includes several other areas. For instance, the non-recognition of same-sex couples by immigration and the HIV ban.
Can you talk a little more about that? Yes.
Yeah, sure. Most of the people that come to our task force meetings and call us and contact us from all around the country, and in fact all around the world, are gay men and lesbians who, for some reason or another, have come in contact with American immigration and have felt discriminated against. Usually this takes the form of U.S. citizens who want to have their non-U.S. national lovers live with them in the United States. Basically, immigration law provides for heterosexual couples to marry, and if one of them is non-American, for them to join the American in this country. This isn't available to a gay couple because INS doesn't recognize their relationships. They don't have any legal way of marrying in the United States, and so INS doesn't confer that benefit. This forces a lot of really awful situations. Americans that have to live abroad with their lovers in foreign countries, and Americans who live with their lovers in the United States but have to fear of being separated, you know, at any time based on various
their lover could be deported, right?
Deportation, you know, the end of a visa, the end of a tourist visa. Also, the HIV ban obviously presents some problems to lesbians and gay men. The HIV ban bans all non-Americans from immigrating to the United States who are HIV positive.
I understand you could get a waiver, but that's a special circumstance.
Right. Under some circumstances, the law provides for a waiver, and this is where sort of there's a problem. The waiver is available for those immigrating under family sponsorship. So if the non-American is coming here to join a spouse or a parent or a sibling, and in that way, then there's a waiver available. Right. However, many gays and lesbians are coming to the United States to join their partners, and it's just a double whammy. INS doesn't recognize the relationships and doesn't offer that waiver. So an HIV positive man, for instance, who's joining his American lover in the United States would be barred from immigrating.
What concrete ways does the task force hope to try and change this? Or what sort of, I guess, do you talk to politicians? Are you trying to change it within INS? Or who do you petition, in other words, to try and get some changes?
Well, we're doing a lot of things. We're first we're trying to raise awareness of the issue in general. We're trying to raise the issue in the gay and lesbian community.
That's why you're here today.
Right, that's why I'm here today. I'm trying to get the message out to the gay and lesbian community, as well as to the whole society, for people to understand exactly what kind of injustices there are in the immigration system as it now exists. It's very important to explain to people exactly what is happening and how it is unjust and unfair and how it discriminates, so they can understand that it's an issue of basic fairness. With raising awareness, with finding the couples that are in the situation and trying to bring them into this network, we can create a body of evidence and show, for instance, a government agency like the Immigration and Naturalization Service that just recognizing gay couples would go a long way to stopping the injustice in other areas, because just recognizing the lesbian gay couples would end the injustice in the HIV front.
Right. Do you have a comment on that? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the incredible things that we've seen is that many people in the lesbian and gay community have no awareness or little awareness of immigration issues, and many people who are interested in immigration issues have little awareness of the issues that particularly affect lesbians and gay men. So part of our goal is to raise public awareness generally about this, and to tell lesbian and gay immigrants and U.S. citizens with foreign national partners that there is a place where we can organize together and attempt to change the law. And one thing that is very clear is that unless we all come together and begin to organize in this way, the law will never change. Our relationships will never be recognized. One of the ways that we try to dramatize this is by saying, for example, if next week, I fell in love with a man from France, I could decide that we could marry and I could bring him here as my spouse. But if I had been in a 20-year relationship with a woman from France and we had 2 kids together and had a life together, homes together, etc., she would be under the law a complete stranger to me. I would have no ability to bring her into the country. And that is exactly the discrimination that the task force is aiming to rectify.
Right, yeah. How are you funded? How do you work through volunteer efforts like yourself, Levi?
Yeah.
You're a volunteer.
Right, I'm a volunteer. The task force is made up of almost entirely people who are in a situation in which they're being discriminated against, and so they have there's a lot of pain and suffering, and there's a lot of room to funnel that energy into volunteering. So we have people who have dedicated a lot of time to this cause and who have volunteered their time to sort of disseminate information and help put together the task force. We work under the auspices of Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund in New York.
Right. Isn't there pressure generally? There's so feeling across the whole country to limit immigration. There's sort of a right-wing thing, and actually the Clinton administration seems to be buying into it a little bit with its own initiatives about limiting immigration. Would you agree? Do you have any comments on that?
And actually that's one of the reasons why the task force and Lambda's launching of the task force is so important. When people in the situation face a double whammy of anti-immigrant sentiment and anti-gay sentiment, and when you combine those two things, it's extraordinarily difficult to achieve change. So part of Lambda's role, being a national organization that does test case litigation on behalf of lesbians and gay men and people with HIV, is to attempt to get these stories out and to address this issue either through policy changes or legal changes or whatever way we can manage. And it's so often that the truth in these situations gets lost amidst all of the kinds of prejudice that you're talking about.
Right, yeah. Well, we're out of time almost, but I want to thank you so much, and you're making such a wonderful contribution, the two of you. Really appreciate your coming up to be with us today.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Coming up next, a personal look at the struggle involved in the fight for asylum. But first, here are some important facts. After the March 1994 ruling, the Immigration and Naturalization Service distributed to all its asylum offices throughout the country a memo which read in part the following: applicants who are seeking asylum must establish well-founded fear of persecution and demonstrate that they could not relocate to safety within their own country. One person who can tell us firsthand about running from persecution is here with us today, along with his attorney, Noemi Masalia. He is currently seeking asylum, and for his protection, he is in disguise, and his voice has been altered. Thank you both for coming here today. I really appreciate your coming up to see us.
Thank you.
Noemi, can you tell us about your client's case and a little bit about the stages that you've gone through with it?
Sure. Mohammed applied for asylum back in April of 1993, prior to this decision. Our decision to file for asylum took a long time to reach our decision.
Not an easy one.
Not an easy one. When the law excluding the law which had previously excluded homosexuals from entering the United States, gays and lesbians, was repealed, it was at that point that we began discussing it seriously. That was in 1990, and we only filed in 93, so that gives you an indication of how long it took. And we're still waiting a decision. We submitted the application for an advisory opinion to the UN High Commissioner for Refugee, who deemed, after evaluating the case, that Mohammed was in fact fell under the definition of refugee pursuant to the UN protocol, of which the United States is a signatory. Although that's not binding on the Immigration Service, I find that it'll be a strong,
Right.
it's compelling.
Right. So, and there's compelling reasons from the country of origin. Can you talk about that? This is persecution of gay men and lesbians.
Well, Iran is an Islamic fundamentalist country, and homosexuality is deemed to be against Islamic law as a religion, as a political act. So for many reasons, gays and lesbians are terrified of living in Iran. They fear, they can be, I mean, with very little due process, they can be found guilty of that, quote, sin. They can choose then one of three ways of being executed, whether stoning, being thrown off the cliff, or before the firing squad, or 1,000 lashes. That's another way, but it's horrifying.
Awful. Yes. So this is expected that this would happen to your client, in fact, if he returned, that he would be given a death sentence.
Well, yeah. I mean, if he returned to Iran, he would. He could not live there. You know, it's asking a heterosexual to change his or her way of being.
Right.
And you can't ask somebody to do that. And
right, yes.
Given that he could not, he would probably be punished for it.
Right. You're quite a specialist in this area.
I'm an immigration lawyer.
Right, yes.
And I'm also on the board of Lambda Legal Defense, so this kind of case combines my
your two main
my
interests,
two passions,
right. Are there other cases that come to mind that are as striking and as intense as this one?
I'm also representing a man from Pakistan who's presently under exclusion proceedings. He arrived in New York and immediately asked for asylum, fleeing persecution from Pakistan, and a Chinese man.
Because People's Republic of China is also a dangerous country for homosexuals.
Terrifying.
Right. Guest X, thank you for being here. How did you get into the U.S.?
I came as a visitor. I came on a visiting visa, and I liked it so much, found a job, and was on an H-1 visa for a period of time. And then my visa expired, and as Noemi said, we were going back and forth with the idea of applying for asylum, and finally we did it.
How did you get in touch with her?
Through a friend. Because I was looking around for lawyers, and she was one of the people I met, and she's the one that
knew that she could do it for you, help you do it. What factored in your decision to seek asylum? Experiences or information you had about your own country?
Well, it's a combination of basically freedom, wanting to be free, wanting to be able to move like any other free person, be able to be myself, and conduct my life, travel,
to another country if you wish, just to act normally. Do you have any sense of, you know, how this is affecting your family or or anyone back in?
Well, that is my biggest fear. The reason I would like to disguise myself is because of that, because I'm afraid of their safe being if this is disclosed, and my own safekeeping, because I don't really quite know what would happen to me, because there could be agents all over the place, because it has been mentioned on a couple of public announcements by some of the head figures in the country that specifically if you're a homosexual, you would be executed. You're not allowed to remain in society as a free person. And you don't basically not only have any rights, but you're against the government, against the revolution, and against God and religion. So therefore you have to be eliminated.
I see, it's
If
awful.
I may add, just the fact
Yes,
that
please.
Mohammed has to disguise himself speaks.
Very much, yes. Because even though he's here in the U.S.
He's still not fully free because he's terrorized by the idea that his family could suffer because of what he's asking.
where his identity
Right, and he
revealed.
himself here. That's
Right, some agent of the government here or some other.
Iran is a fanatical country in that regard.
Right, yeah. Guest X, would you have anything to say to someone who was similarly situated, going through what you're going through? Have any advice or anything that you could contribute to their decision-making process?
Well, I think one factor that's very important is it isn't an easy decision. And you also have to realize that it's a matter of life and death situation. It's not something that I half decided to do just because it felt right, but it seemed like the only thing that I could do. And it is very frightening, it's very nerve-wracking, but I feel very positive about it. So does Noemi, and that's
Go forward
basically
from
all.
here.
Yes,
Yeah.
What sort of support have you felt from the lesbian and gay community for your effort? Have you had any reaching out to?
Well, the thing is, again, because of the identity situation, I haven't been telling many people.
Right.
But the general support that I've been getting through Lambda has been tremendous. It's been wonderful. I've had a couple of letters even from people from various parts of the country, supporting letters.
Right.
Have been very touching. Very.
Right.
Wonderful.
People who are understanding of
Right, yeah.
the situation you're in. Yes. And the expense of it all. It must be, you know, quite an undertaking that way too. Is that true?
It's more of a emotional expense.
Right. yeah.
Really? Oh yes. You mean the waiting and the delays and the.
Every stage you have to go. The waiting is the waiting process, and
Right.
having to live with this constantly.
Right, right.
Noemi, you're involved in the task force. Is that correct?
That's
yeah. What
right.
sort of work do you do with them?
Well, I give, you know, I sort of give some legal direction to the group if necessary. I'm so glad that we have formed that group because I've spent so many years helping heterosexuals be able to live together in this country, and
Right.
you know, the same kind of couples, just as viable, but same sex, come to me as well, and there's nothing that I can do.
Right. So now with the task force, it's so much better.
Well,
there's or at least
we're
that
working
there's
towards
a
trying to make
working.
it so much better.
Right, right. That's really wonderful. Do you have any advice that you would give to someone who is in Guest X's situation? You know, about how to proceed or what sort of steps you know should be taken?
To think about it very, very carefully, but not to be afraid. And if it's a valid case, I'm of the opinion that the U.S. will have the moral backbone to grant asylum.
Right.
It's been a country of immigrants. It's been a country of refugees and asylees, and I think that this is just a new way of welcoming.
Right. Yeah. Are you finding members of the lesbian and gay community are kind of getting the message now? You know, I guess our whole movement for our own rights has expanded to a certain level, and we can now look at the global situation.
Right. There's the other side too, is that a lot of members of our community have never thought about this,
Right.
and have just taken it for granted that the struggle is limited to the United States. And no, it's not that way, and the struggle is they've never heard, you know, when they're shocked to hear about the same-sex partners having this problem and being able to remain together. And they're hearing it more and more.
Yeah,
So,
that's really something.
oh yeah, I think the task force is really doing an excellent job in opening the eyes of not only the members of the community, but really
Right, yes.
the whole.
And also you think of it like that level of awareness really needs to be raised on a national level too. Because I think in the New
Absolutely.
York area...
Absolutely. The issues are not just, the problems are not just limited to New York. It's
right,
people in
yeah.
Texas and people in California and Arkansas
Right.
that find themselves at the university level falling in love with a foreign student, and what do we do
Right.
when we graduate?
Right, yes. Are there other countries that have been more favorable that have taken a lead here? I think Canada, is that right? And
Canada on a case-by-case basis, but legally, generally, yes, the Nordic countries, Australia, New Zealand, they have, their immigration law permits upon an evaluation of the viability of the relationship, very much like they do for the heterosexual relationships. They look at the same-sex couples and give the foreigner the right to remain in the country.
we definitely have our work cut out for us in the U.S.
Very much so.
Noemi,
But we
thank
welcome
you.
it.
We welcome it, yes. Okay, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
Guest X,
you.
I wish you all the best in your struggle and in your ability to get freedom in your life here. Thanks for watching. Before we go to our closing credits, we leave you with a message of hope from some concerned people. Until next time, be proud.
It happens when you're not looking. The basic human rights of peaceful people are violated by their own governments.
It happens when you're not listening. Men, women, children unjustly imprisoned, tortured, executed, or disappeared for their religion, color, sex, or simply their beliefs.
So what if we did nothing? What if no one said a word?
We at Amnesty International believe that each of us has a moral obligation to see, to hear, and to speak out. We've seen the horrors that occur when the world stands silent.
Call 1-800-AMNESTY. It's your human right.
Your local Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center is a place to connect and get involved. Various ongoing groups and social events are conducted at or by your center, and it is also a clearinghouse for gay and lesbian information nationwide. We urge you to join, get involved, and support your community.